quitsmokingweed.com, the podcast on Spotify.
Most people brace for the first 2 weeks, but you know what actually catches them off guard is what comes after.
Boy, for sure. The landscape completely changes.
Yeah, like the withdrawal has faded and your life looks pretty normal again. There's really nothing stopping you from smoking except your own decision. That is the part nobody warns you about, and honestly, it is where staying clean is actually won or lost.
It is a totally different battle.
Right, because getting through those early days is incredibly demanding physically. But relying on willpower to stay clean long-term is just a losing game. I mean, willpower is a finite resource that runs out at the end of a hard day. Structure does not run out. We really need to look at what pulls people back months into the process and how to build a life where weed simply has less purchase.
We really have to outline the reality of this timeline without sugarcoating anything, The early days get all the attention. But the hard middle stretch is what we call the resilience phase.
Okay, so when does that happen?
That runs from around day 5 through roughly 3 weeks. Your physical symptoms are peaking and then slowly fading during that window. You need significant resilience just to push through the lingering physical discomfort and the sleep disruption.
That sounds exhausting just to ride out. Then after that point, around week 3, you enter the clarity phase. And that spans roughly week 3 to week 7. I think it is important to define what stabilization actually looks like here.
It is, because it varies from person to person.
It really does. Real stabilization takes about 7 weeks if you have active support. But if you are doing this without support, or if you have a history of heavy long-term use, stabilization takes up to 3 months. The system just requires that much time to find a true baseline.
What's fascinating here is what happens in the brain when the physical withdrawal is over. People often reach that clarity phase and report feeling profoundly flat.
Oh, I recall feeling that exact flatness when breaking a major habit. It was just a sense that something was fundamentally missing from my day. But why do you still feel so empty if the physical withdrawal is technically over?
Well, the flatness you are describing is a reversible adjustment. It is not permanent damage. Your body has an intricate internal network called the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS.
Okay, I have heard of that.
It regulates mood, appetite, stress recovery, and sleep. When you introduce heavy amounts of THC into your body over a long period, your ECS essentially gets lazy.
So it just stops doing the work on its own?
Yes, it stops producing its own natural regulating chemicals because the THC is doing all the heavy lifting. So when you remove the THC, your internal system does not just instantly turn back on.
So it takes time to boot up again?
It takes weeks or even months to upregulate its natural production again. During that lag time, you just feel flat.
It sounds like moving out of a fully furnished house. Like the weed was the furniture, and now you are standing in an empty room, and while it is totally clean, you have nowhere to sit down and rest.
That captures the reality perfectly, actually. Weed was doing several specific jobs for you for a very long time.
Like what kind of jobs?
Well, it provided stress relief, a reliable way to wind down at the end of the day, social bonding, and a constant, predictable break from anxiety.
Oh, wow. So if those underlying needs go unmet, the pull to go back stays remarkably strong.
Yes. Staying clean means replacing those critical functions, not just removing the weed and expecting the empty space to fill itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the brain is in this flat rebuilding phase, it becomes highly vulnerable to specific situations. The empty room makes you look for the old furniture.
That is a very real danger.
So the first major vulnerability involves social settings. Like you are around friends who smoke, or you find yourself at a gathering where it is present.
Most long-term relapses happen in those exact social settings. They rarely happen in private moments of weakness.
Why is that?
The danger in social settings is that the social pull stacks directly on top of the chemical one.
So you are dealing with external pressure from the environment.
Yes, but you are also fighting a powerful internal memory. The brain remembers that cannabis was the primary chemical glue in those social situations.
So the brain is actively anticipating the ritual. You smell it, you see the familiar faces, and your brain just prepares for the chemical release that used to follow.
It is an intense reaction.
When you're standing there empty-handed, you are fighting both the psychological desire to fit in and the biological craving triggered by those sensory cues.
And the combined weight of those two forces is incredibly heavy. I mean, the brain operates heavily on classical conditioning.
Oh, kind of like Pavlov's dogs.
Just like Pavlov's dogs salivating at the sound of a bell.
Yeah.
Your brain releases craving signals when it encounters the sensory cues of a familiar smoking environment.
It expects the THC to arrive.
Right, and it creates a sensation of immense deprivation when it does not.
If social settings are dangerous because we are biologically wired to seek connection and follow familiar cues, I guess it makes sense that the opposite extreme is just as risky.
It is a huge trap.
Yeah, which brings us to emotional overwhelm. You go through a bad breakup, a severe work crisis, or just a very low stretch of isolated days.
That specific situation is when one smoke turns into daily use the fastest.
Because of the acute stress.
When a crisis hits, your body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol. The prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and long-term planning, effectively gets bypassed.
Your brain just reverts to its most deeply ingrained survival habits.
It remembers that THC provided immediate emotional numbing in the past, and it demands that relief.
So you are seeking an emotional tourniquet. You convince yourself that the sheer weight of the current stress warrants a temporary return to smoking just to survive the night.
And once you open that door during a crisis, the brain latches on to the chemical shortcut.
It bypasses any new coping mechanisms you were trying to build.
Yes, like taking a walk or calling a friend, because those natural methods take time to work.
That makes total sense.
The brain wants the fastest route to relief, and THC provides it instantly. The relapse happens quickly because you are actively seeking an escape from acute pain.
Okay, well, here is where it gets really interesting. The third vulnerability is entirely different from the first two. It is the thought that you have been clean long enough. And I actually disagree with the conventional wisdom here. I think feeling confident after a few months is a very good thing.
You really think so?
Yeah, I do. Taking pride in your progress, trusting yourself again, and feeling like you have conquered the habit shows you are building a new identity. If I make it 3 months without weed, I should feel bulletproof.
Well, I see that completely differently. That confidence is actually the most underestimated trap you will face in the first year.
Really? But building a new identity is necessary.
It is necessary, but feeling bulletproof leads directly to complacency. The brain possesses a defense mechanism known as fading effect bias. It deliberately dulls the memory of painful experiences to help you move forward in life.
Oh, so it makes you forget how terrible the withdrawal actually was.
It erases the memory of the night sweats, the intense irritability, and the desperation that drove you to quit in the first place. After a few good months, the acute pain of those early days is just gone.
And the brain reframes your past heavy use as not that bad.
It romanticizes the relaxed Friday nights and conveniently edits out the daily brain fog.
So the confidence is a false signal. It tricks you into thinking you are a different person who can now handle the drug casually.
This is exactly when people test themselves. They intentionally put themselves around weed or by a small amount just to prove they have control.
And I am guessing that does not go well.
They almost always discover the test was significantly harder than expected. Because the ECS is still delicate, introducing THC again reawakens the old dormant pathways instantly.
The old patterns reassert themselves before the person even realizes they have lost control.
Which is why relying on feeling bulletproof is so dangerous.
Okay, so if confidence can be a dangerous trap and willpower inevitably runs out, we really need to focus on how to build a life where weed simply has less purchase. We have to talk about the physical and structural requirements that actually rebuild your system.
So you are not constantly fighting a battle of willpower against those unmet needs.
Exactly. So what actually works?
Physical movement is the single most effective tool you have for rebuilding that system.
Do you mean something like heavy lifting or marathon training?
No, you do not need an extreme, punishing workout regimen. Even 20 minutes of anything that raises your heart rate fundamentally changes how the next few hours feel.
That makes sense biologically speaking?
Yes, from a biological standpoint, elevating your heart rate forces the body to release brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which helps prepare neural pathways.
Oh, and it also builds a real dopamine response.
The natural dopamine release helps compensate for the lack of THC. But more importantly, cardiovascular exercise actively stimulates your body to produce anandamide.
What is that?
Anandamide is a natural endocannabinoid. It is often called the bliss molecule.
So by moving your body, you are actively giving your ECS the raw materials it needs to recalibrate and function on its own again.
You are replacing the chemical function weed used to serve with a natural biological process.
Okay, we can build 2 other structural pillars alongside that physical movement. The first is having +1 person who knows about your quit for accountability.
That is a huge factor for success.
Having someone in your corner changes the dynamic from a solitary internal struggle to a shared commitment. It removes the secrecy that addiction thrives on.
And the second structural pillar is establishing a firm internal rule that you do not smoke, not even once. A firm boundary beats deciding on a case-by-case basis every single time you are tempted.
Oh, you are talking about removing the burden of choice entirely.
Yes, a firm rule removes the fatigue of constant decision-making. If you have to negotiate with yourself every time you smell weed at a concert or every time you have a stressful day at work, you will eventually lose.
Your willpower muscle will just fatigue.
A non-negotiable rule means zero mental energy is spent debating whether tonight is an exception. The decision was already made weeks ago.
So, what does this all mean? The honest frame on the long-term reality is that cravings do not vanish completely after the physical withdrawal ends.
No, they do not.
The timeline shows that cravings get much less frequent and significantly less intense, dropping off noticeably by months 3 to 6. But situational triggers, like running into an old smoking buddy or experiencing a sudden life crisis, can still catch you months out.
Which is why year one must be treated as a phase where vigilance still matters, even when life feels completely normal.
But if you do slip during that year, you need to view it as information. It is not a verdict on your character.
A slip means a boundary was weak or a trigger was stronger than your current coping mechanism.
The real danger is the story you tell yourself after it happens. If your narrative immediately shifts to believing you already failed, so what is the point of trying, you are setting yourself up for a full relapse.
That is exactly right.
The shame of the slip becomes the exact emotion that drives you to smoke again the next day to numb the feeling of failure.
That story is exactly how one smoke becomes a full return to daily use. Starting again the next day is both possible and entirely worth it.
Because one slip does not magically erase the structural, physical recalibration your ECS has already undergone over the last few months.
You're not starting from scratch biologically.
You have a solid foundation to return to immediately.
This raises an important question for anyone navigating this process. If a slip does happen, do not just look at the specific moment you picked up the weed.
You mean looking backwards?
Look backwards. What was your internal state right before you decided to smoke, and what could have gone differently in the hour before?
Like, were you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? Finding the root cause in that prior hour is how you prevent the next slip.
That is where the real work happens.
The Release, Resilience, and Clarity program gives you the structure for exactly this. $20 a month at quit-smoking-weed.com.